All right. Well, welcome to today's webinar at NotesCode. Our topic is redefining collaboration, enterprise and IT, and the cloud. And a special thank you to Francie Tanner from Panagenda for preparing this presentation for us. She is an IBM champion and a director at Panagenda. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. During the presentation, if you have a question that comes to mind, you can certainly expand your GoToWebinar control panel with the little red box with the white arrow, and you will see a section called Questions. If you click on the plus sign, you can then type in your question so that you don't forget it, and then that'll be queued up for me to ask Francie at the end of her presentation. We will also be recording this so that if some of your colleagues have not been able to join us today, you'll be able to share that link with them later. And then also, just a reminder that because you're attending this webinar today, you are entered in to win a Mac Pack, which is the, you win all three of these items, the MacBook Air, an iPad Air, and an Apple TV. So that is a very nice prize. Or you could select to win the trip to ConnectEd, held here in Orlando in January. You know, so it used to be called Lotusphere, and then it's called Connections. This year it's ConnectEd. So, you know, we'll have to all get used to these renaming events as we go along, but that's what it is. Okay, so enough of my side. So Francie, if you've reset your slides and ready to go, I'm going to switch the screen over to you. And you should just click on Show Your Screen once you see that.
Yep.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
All right, we see your screen.
Great. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Francie Tanner. I'll actually properly introduce myself in just a minute, but I wanted to kind of start off by having you guys think about a few things, because if you're anything like me, you're kind of doing your day-to-day work and dealing with projects and deadlines and maybe server ups or downs and some strategic things, but it's pretty rare that you get a moment to kind of step back and really think about IT, or in our case specifically collaboration as a whole. And here's some interesting figures that I found specifically around data. You all know, and as you are experiencing in your environment, that the amount of data that you are expected to manage and basically make available for your end users grows at pretty crazy rates. So you may not see all of it. You may not be dealing with mobile data or anything like that, but basically, depending on which numbers you look at, it is said that the amount of data that IT has doubles, basically nearly doubles. It's anywhere between 40 and 80% depending on the industry. And things like video blogging and all these things that are brand new now that will certainly be more enterprise mainstream, are doing a really great job of making this a whole lot more difficult. So think about data in your collaboration infrastructure, and then think about that data multiplying, essentially, and then think about the cost of that data, depending on, again, who you listen to, the amount of money it takes to manage a gigabyte of data is anywhere between $25 and $150 per year, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. So think about optimization, lowering our IT budget. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I hope, for your sake anyway, that you directly aren't in charge of those directives, but that's basically where collaboration is going, right? It's all about lowering budgets, it's all about doing more with less, it's all about consolidation, optimization, and of course what we're here to talk about is how exactly do you do that. But talking about data management, so how much is your data growing? Are you even aware of the cost that a gigabyte costs in your organization? There's some pretty surprising numbers when we work through this with their customers. Depending on where you live, you may have directives around social responsibility. So there's laws in Europe and other parts of the world, not as much in the U.S., but that actually make it illegal or borderline illegal to have employees work during off hours or on weekends. So if you have any kind of laws or regulations or even just company directives around that, how exactly are you able to follow them, which of course requires you to first of all know who exactly collaborates during off hours. What are those users' collaboration patterns? Who are those users? Great example we have from one of our customers that asked us to do this out of Germany, actually. They basically started with, well, we're going to turn off all traveler traffic on the weekends because this is nonsense and nobody should be working on the weekends. And when we were able to help them understand who exactly it is that is working on the weekends, which is executives and sales, they went, well, you know, actually, maybe let's reevaluate that. Let's look into, you know, what exactly is going on here. Another effort you may be tasked with is around social tools, mobile efforts. We'll talk about the collaboration patterns more later. It's a relatively new term, and then basically just has to do with, you know, what are people doing, not necessarily from a policing aspect, but if you understand how your users consume content in your environment, it also means you can then spot abnormal consumption in your environment. So with regards to security issues, that may have an impact on what you're doing or what you're facing in the future. And then virtualization, there's so much more that I couldn't fit on this slide. There's you know, Notes browser plugins and webification, modernization. Virtualization is another thing that you guys may be working with now or may have already had. Cloud is another sort of a virtualization thing, right? Cloud means basically you're running something on somebody else's computer. That's a big trend right now. And Scott, I'll have you run a poll in just a second actually on that. But again, depending on who you listen to, so virtualization of your collaboration and infrastructure or going to the cloud, depending on who you listen to, may save 20 to 40% on your operating costs, which is kind of, you know, an easy number to throw out there. But realistically, we all know that, you know, migrating to anything, whether it's, you know, cloud or a competitive platform, is extremely time and money intensive. So on that note, actually, we have a question for you, Scott, if you want to run the first question we have lined up. Okay. That is around the cloud efforts.
Perfect. So here's the poll question. So are you currently evaluating moving your collaboration infrastructure to the cloud? So yes, or maybe yes in next year, or not yet. So if we can get everybody to participate in this poll, I'll share the results in just a moment. So we already have 70% of us have voted. So that means that everybody's still awake. That's good. And
fun to watch the numbers change. Do attendees see that as well?
No, unfortunately not. That's just for us. So,
oh, man, okay.
But I'll show them the results here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and I'm going to close this poll. And I'm going to share the results. So here is the results. So yes, 42% of us are currently evaluating moving to the cloud. The rest of us, well, another 20% or so in next year, and then not yet for 40% of us. So it's almost a third, right down the middle there. Okay.
Right. Which is interesting, and we're finding, so the reason I put this slide in the beginning is just to kind of, get your thoughts stimulated about all the different things that collaboration and cost savings and kind of where are you going in 2015 may entail. So interesting. So a third, yes, evaluating cloud roughly. It's actually a little bit more. Some of you in 2015 and some of you not yet. We find that this also actually varies greatly when we talk about geography. So people in Europe are actually less likely at this point to be looking at cloud. So, okay, so let's talk about all these things at a little greater detail, and of course specifically how we can help you make more sense of whatever of these efforts you may be faced to deal with. Okay, so proper introduction. My name is Francie Tanner. I'm a director for Panagenda, which is an Austrian-based software development company. I do have a little over 17 years experience, which is, I'm pretty sure there's a typo in there somewhere. Working with very complex collaboration challenges for enterprises, and it's really kind of small customers to 150,000 user customers all over the place, which is a lot of fun actually. I'm a repeat IBM champion and originally from Switzerland, and then I spent some time in the Caribbean and just now moved to the US. Not a huge fan of your weather here, but I'm sure I'll get used to it at some point. Okay, very quickly, a little bit more about Panagenda. We do have roughly 40 global partners all over the world, so pretty much regardless of where you are, we can help you in your native time zone, in your native language. A very small, actually, interpretation of some of the customers that we work with, that we help. And very quickly, last one, we do have several standalone solutions. Our most popular one that we have, you've probably heard of, it's called Marble Client. We have others. Marble Client specifically deals with client management and upgrades and browser plugin deployments and things like virtualization. We have other standalone products that work with servers and apps, and what we're actually going to talk about today is something that kind of encompasses or draws on a lot of those standalone products and looks at the infrastructure as a whole in order to make more intelligent decisions and kind of plot the path for where you're going with your infrastructure in the future. And that's called IDNA, actually. Okay, future-proofing strategic IT. Okay, so what exactly does that mean? And I'm sure some of you know exactly what that means because you live it every day. Again, maybe not directly, but I'd be surprised if you guys hadn't been kind of forced to deal with directives from management that all of a sudden say, you know what, I heard this cloud thing, and you know what, let's move to cloud. And you're kind of sitting there going, but wait a minute, it's not that easy. Do you even know what that means? Or management going, you know what, let's go to Outlook, and you're just kind of, sitting there again and going, okay, well, let me explain what that means and what the deal is with all our applications that we've been developing for, 15 years or whatever. But in the past, the way that IT was run, or maybe more how in simpler IT times, I should say, projects were run is they had very defined starting points and fairly defined end goals, right? And your job was to kind of, make it happen, right? Do the bit in the middle. So, do you guys remember when like ICQ was kind of up and coming, and it was like this rebel, and you could chat over your computer, and it was like this crazy thing? And if you would have told anybody back in those days that chat and that way of collaborating, it would turn into a common enterprise way to work, I think just about anybody would have kind of told you, oh, well, that's crazy. That's all kind of toys and games, right? That's not for the enterprise. But, here we are with St. Times has been around for ages, Skype, whatever. And then kind of the mobilization effort kicked in with a bang with the iPhone. And again, if you kind of, in the beginning, would have told people, everybody's going to ditch their BlackBerries or whatever and go to work off iPads on business trips, that's even a thing that's possible because your apps can indeed be rendered on that. People would have told you that these things are crazy. So now all of a sudden, you have a collaboration infrastructure that spans at least 10 different brands and types of mobile devices. And actually, there's probably even 10 different iPhones alone, but that spans across a variety of mobile devices, that spans across just as many types of browsers, right? There's IE, there's Firefox, there's Chromes, there's plugins, there's different versions. That you are now expected to just kind of make things work, right? So it's maybe a little bit more complex. Let's go to the cloud. Well, that doesn't just mean let's grab all our data, migrate it to somebody else's server, but it also means let's make it viewable and workable off mobile devices, off iPads, off different browsers, which of course means how many different browsers are used, how many different mobile devices are used, how do they render information, what about the app UI? So kind of every one of these little things isn't just kind of one, here's where we start and here's where we end and now we're done kind of thing. IT really at this point is constantly evolving. Even if you just think about, keeping your browsers up to date or streamlined, and then what about people that use their own machines to work from home via VPN? Any one of these things that may be part of a, let's say, cloud migration are real, projects on their own. So IT is basically constantly evolving, and it includes a variety of things that maybe don't directly are managed by you, like I said, browsers, mobile devices, but they require for you to manage apps in a different way or to be involved in making decisions. Do we, in fact, move to a different platform? Do we, in fact, spend money on modernization and working with the UI? Where do we go? So where do we go from here? Which, again, depending on what exactly you're trying to get at. So you're doing a virtualization project, an upgrade project, I'm not even sure, but let's spend less money project. Across any of those, what you really need to know in the collaboration infrastructure, what exactly is being used and what isn't. And you know what? That's the part of the infrastructure we don't need to really talk about anymore, right? What is not used. So what is used? Who is using it? And I'll explain in a little bit why you may very much care about who is using it. Just understanding where people come from geographically, of course, has a huge impact on how a cloud infrastructure, for example, is structured, or a consolidation project as well. Where do they live? Where does data live? How do the two interact? Who shares content with whom? So when we talk about collaboration, what's the overwhelming point? The point is to share valuable content to the right people at the right time. So more than just, how are you keeping things alive? How are you helping your organization to render more or better content to the right people at the right time? So what are some of the challenges that kind of stand in the way? We talked about data volume briefly, so IT complexity, which certainly is never ever going to just kind of stop and regress or anything. If anything, it's going to get even more complex with technologies that maybe don't even exist yet. So data volume is a huge topic. This certainly shows no signs of slowing down. And again, it's like, well, disk drives are so cheap. That's kind of the perception. But when we talk about, your bandwidth probably doesn't automatically get upgraded every year, yet your data does. So if there's, and maybe your company does, so if there's more people consuming more data over the same amount of bandwidth, that's not really a sustainable situation. So IT complexity grows, data volume grows. There's mobile devices, instant messaging, video conferencing, browsers, social applications, all kinds of things that get added to the mix every year. And what we're finding when we're working with management particularly is there really is a lack of understanding the current environment. And I mean that in a way that, yes, maybe a CEO or whatever knows that an IBM collaboration infrastructure exists, but one of the issues that our customers run into before they come to us is very often, well, what is it used for? And in the absence of an easily quantifiable answer, the answer very often is, well, a lot of stuff, or a lot of collaboration. But what exactly does that mean? Like, how much is actually consumed? Are these things that are being used daily, or are these applications that, got retired 10 years ago? What is actually used and what isn't? The perception also on the management level is new is always better, right? We maybe are guilty of kind of thinking that ourselves, right? A new software, a new version, whatever, is always better. But basically where this is getting at is there's a lot of competitive platforms. Well, somebody said that, they're moving to Google, and clearly new is better, so why aren't we moving to Google? And being able to not necessarily argue, but, provide input into factual input as opposed to emotional input can be very difficult without having an understanding of, what is actually, how alive is this collaboration infrastructure that we're managing. Cheaper is most certainly a thing that we're required to work with, right? So there's more data, there's more people, there's probably not more bandwidth, and somehow it's all going to be cheaper. Cheaper isn't always better, by the way, newsflash, I'm sure you guys know that. But, again, the point is, how do you justify these things, or how do you even explain what exactly is used and how it's used and the value that it is adding? So what typically happens is that there's management that doesn't truly understand the collaboration landscape, and they go, well, you know what, I don't really get it. doesn't seem, it's probably just really old. There's this newer stuff over here, so let's add some of that. Let's migrate mail to Outlook or whatever, but keep our apps, and then, you know, that'll somehow make it better, when in reality, that just more than likely ends up more complicated, and the amount of money you would spend on, you know, doing something like that is almost always wasted. So should we go to the cloud? Should we move off IBM at all? IT decision-making, you know, strategic decision-making really is very difficult and expensive. And again, it's not like there's readily available, you know, how useful is this button in any of the software applications that you guys are managing to give you, much less an executive, an easy answer. And as far as consecutives are concerned, they're, you know, the only thing worse than a wrong decision very often is no decision. So again, kind of circling back to the collaboration poll, between the people that are already looking at cloud and will be looking at cloud or will be going to the cloud next year, that's actually 2/3 of you. So, and I'm not saying going to the cloud is the wrong decision, by the way. I'm just saying, you know, a lot of those decisions are probably made because of a lack of understanding of what is actually happening. Or maybe not. Who knows? I won't jump to that conclusion, but moving to the cloud certainly is expensive, actually. Operation, once you're there, may not be as much, but getting there certainly is. So what we see very often in our customers, the ones that do either move off of IBM or they move into cloud or some other direction, some kind of, you know, whatever, very often we see that they kind of do a little bit of both. So I mentioned earlier, you know, we have customers that say, oh, well, you know, mail is easy to move, so let's do that. So they move mail off of ICS, but they may leave applications on there. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but we certainly have several customers that ended up, you know, even years after, now supporting both, right? So instead of consolidating or making things easier, you actually are now managing both platforms, or 2 platforms, or 3, or however many may be. So but the point is, you know, these things are difficult. There really is no one right or wrong answer, and we certainly aren't ever going to tell you that, you know, all IBM ICS is the way to go. But what we try to do, of course, is shed awareness onto what exactly is happening. So how do we do that? The panagenda answer to what is used, how is it used, how useful or used or alive is our IBM collaboration platform. The answer for us is in the form of a virtual appliance called IDNA. It's a downloadable VMware image. It is operational within about an hour. It is on premises, which means that you don't have to farm your data to us or IBM. You guys may have heard of IBM Double Check. This is a different way of dealing with that same question. It does run on-site. And unlike Double Check, which typically runs for about a week, this can be run for any amount of time, which of course the more data you have from your real infrastructure, the more we can tell you. So what kinds of things can we tell you about your infrastructure, and why exactly is this relevant when we talk about, you know, where to go with IT? Should we do virtualization? Should we do consolidation, whatever. So one of the most important things that we can tell you by looking at your data in your environment is what exactly is used, what is accessed, what is actively used, what is read, what is written to, which tells you in a factual, undeniable, drilled down way, and these are actually HTML5 reports. There is a sample report of this on our website, by the way. There's a link at the end. You can drill down into each of these bubbles, what exactly is used, which is basically top right is your most heavily used applications. What are they? If this was live, I could drill down and look at that. What is used and what isn't? And specifically, of course, applications, we mean both mail and other applications. So when we talk about something like how do we split mail from apps, is that even possible? IDNA is really the only way that I'm aware of that you would even know how much the two are connected, and we'll talk about application analysis in just a few minutes. But what exactly is used? Of course, the million-dollar question is also who is using it, right? So if we have a database that is 20 gig and it's used every day, but by 8 people, well, that's something that's probably easier to deal with if we need to modernize that or retire that or whatever, than a database that is used by just about every employee, right? So understanding those differences, what is used, who is using it, this really is, IBM actually calls this the money slide, because it really shows the business value of your existing infrastructure. And again, we're not necessarily, we just give you the data. You do with this whatever you want. You want to take this and go to the cloud, this will tell you how to do that. You want to take this to go to a different platform that absolutely works as well, but you need to know, what do you need to do to make that possible. So what apps need to be retired, what needs to be webified, what needs to be mobile enabled, what needs to be migrated. This is what IDNA is all about. Usage patterns, which you very much are interested in, kind of regardless of what you're doing. Let's say you want to go to the cloud, and instead of all your employees going to servers in their, geographically near locations, they're now being forced to go to 1 or 2 global locations. So what does that mean for my bandwidth? What does that mean for my availability and demand? So if I have giant spikes every day at 10 a.m., does the data center, is it sized in a way that can accommodate that? As far as my users, again, so kind of who accesses things may really matter. So if it's the same, 8 people accessing all the applications, maybe a conversation is warranted at some point. Or I'll show you a slide later that has to do with security, actually. We've been able to use this to identify people that somehow managed to consume, by means of replication, hundreds of gigs of data a day by doing, maybe not so kosher things. So maybe those things are coincidence, maybe not. But do you know the top 10 users in your infrastructure? Odds are you don't, and I'm just saying top 10. There's obviously more to this report. But who are they? What does that mean when we go cloud? If we go cloud, is it a good idea to put all those 10 people in the same data center? Should we split them up? Is the cloud going to be able to deliver to us what we need? What is my cloud potential? And I'm focused on cloud because, well, you are basically, like I said, 2/3 of you are either evaluating going to the cloud or will do so next year. So what does my environment look like if we want to do that? How many apps are used by browser clients? Well, that's pretty easy to webify because basically you're already there, right? There's an app. It's clearly already available via the web, and it's accessed via the browser. So the amount of effort, is very insignificant there. How many apps are used by rich clients only? And that's where things get a little bit more complicated, right? So when it comes to what would it take for us to go to the cloud, you really can't just kind of make up numbers and go, or there is no straightforward formula. Every single one of your environments is different. There's no magic formula that us or anyone else can tell you and say, well, it's going to cost you about this much per app. It doesn't work that way, right? So, but what we can tell you is what is happening today, so you can figure out what you want to do with this tomorrow. So there's odds are, actually what we're seeing across our current customers, odds are that there's about 50% of your collaboration infrastructure that you are not using today. Think about that for a second. Based on, I'm going to say it again, based on customer data, odds are you are not using 50% of your collaboration infrastructure. Now imagine getting rid of half of your collaboration infrastructure. How much easier would that make your life? What would that do towards strategic decision making? Does that mean you can do something easier? Does it mean that maybe you could reduce cost without, going to the cloud? Maybe, maybe not. But again, the question here that we're attempting to answer is how difficult would it be to do something, to move, to migrate, to upgrade, whatever. We do, of course, look at, since we know who accesses what and from where, of course we can tell you all about network traffic. So, as well as database storage profile. So what databases are out there, how big are they, where do they reside geographically, where do users access them from? So of course we can tell you about, as far as Notes is concerned, what is your network traffic demand? Again, you can look at this by geography, by time. What are my spikes? What do I need to have if we moved to another platform or the cloud? What do we need to have to accommodate everything that we're doing today? Looking one level deeper, so let's assume you were picking any of the whatever strategic directions that we talked about. One of the things you'll want to do is look inside your applications. Maybe you're just wanting to modernize or webify. Maybe you want to take it to the cloud eventually, maybe not right away. Maybe you want to go somewhere else. And what exactly does that mean? So assuming that, there's a significant amount of your applications that are actually not being used, so that's good because we can kind of, cut, let's say, roughly half of our apps out of the mix, which is helpful. Now, what about the rest? What do we do with the applications? What is the cost of getting them into whatever, wherever you want to go in the future? And of course, to do that, we need to look inside the applications Again, there's no magic migrate me button, no matter what anybody tells you. There's a good way of streamlining kind of very basic design conversion things. But really it all starts with understanding what is happening in your environment today. So what are my applications made out of? What you're seeing on your screen here is a Tableau visualization, actually, of databases at a particular customer site. So what exactly are they made of? What is the majority, or, obviously we can do this on an application by application basis or across the whole environment, or, the 50% that you're actually using or whatever. So what exactly is inside your apps? What are dependencies that we have? So which apps integrate with mail? So when you're talking about, let's move our mail to Outlook or something like that, and I don't mean when you talk about it. When somebody like your management comes to you and says, hey, why can't we just move our mail to Outlook? That seems like no big deal. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what are the dependencies there? Which ones of your apps interface with mail as part of some kind of workflow? Which apps interface with something funky that, may have even been implemented before you ever got there, like a fax server? Or which apps work with some kind of custom DLL on some server somewhere? Essentially, what breaks if we move, if we go cloud, if we go with another provider? What is no longer going to work? What is required to get us renderable, is that even a word, in mobile devices and iPads, things like that. We do also, just to make this easy and quantifiable for your management, we do use the COCOMO model to calculate time and cost. So again, this isn't meant as a, magic formula, this is what it's going to take, but typically customers come to us when they're not quite sure which way to go, or they're not quite sure, what it would take. You want to go cloud? Well, it depends. How much is the cost? So we are able to not only tell you what is inside your applications, but also help you understand from a cost perspective what it might take to get there. So we do have the ability to look inside apps. We also, I mentioned this earlier, have the ability to know who comes from where to do what. So basically, we look at all your collaboration traffic, so that's how we know what's used and what isn't. We are able to add HR data into this mix and basically tell you, well, so, these applications are all the ones that are on the west coast of the U.S. They're actually used by people in India. Don't know what that means, but here's what's happening. So this really goes a long way towards filling in a lot of blanks as far as how is our environment used and being able to quantify that and understand that. And honestly, I learn something new every time I look at this with a customer. There's so many things, this isn't really your day-to-day thing, right? You can't see this level of detail. You can see individual server logs, but visualizing data like this really goes a long way towards understanding your current environment. And then, of course, being able to answer questions on, where do we go from here? Or being able to argue we shouldn't go there from here because, look at this. So being able to model things like predict the future, what happens if we consolidate our servers? What happens if we're forcing everybody to go into a cloud? What can we expect? You may have, like I mentioned, that one application used by 8 people. Well, that doesn't seem significant. But what if those 8 people is your executive management? Okay, well, now maybe we need to deal with that differently. So being able to understand who your users are that are using your infrastructure and where they're from can be extremely helpful towards answering questions about the future of IT. Okay, a few more minutes of slides, and then we'll do Q&A and maybe talk about some questions that we haven't covered here yet. But with this, what IDNA is all about for us is helping our customers understand their collaboration infrastructure, how it's used by whom, when, how much, which goes into also, it can go into mail flow, it can go into, further levels of application analysis that that we already talked about a little bit. But looking at your collaboration patterns of your users, what does that mean, and how does this help us provide to our end users more functionality that they actually need? So what we're able to do here, and this is an optional feature, this is not a requirement, because some of you may have legal restrictions against maybe gathering mail domains for users that they interact with. But from a business unit perspective, if I'm in sales and I'm about to work with or close a deal with somebody that a competitor I'm up against, how many other people within my organization have emailed with this customer? How many people have collaborated with somebody at that company about a certain keyword, let's say cloud migration? When there has been collaboration with this customer, who were those people, where were they from geographically, and who all was CC'd? So trying to figure out who has knowledge of working with somebody I'm trying to do business with can be very helpful. Or if you want to look at this a different way, who all is communicating or collaborating in one way or another with their competitors, right? And again, this isn't necessarily meant to be Big Brother, but this is meant to allow you to ask any number of questions about what is happening in your collaboration infrastructure that you've really never been able to answer before. And actually what we're doing with this for one of our customers is we are having them select, the kind of keywords and tags and maybe customer domains or topics. So who all has collaborated with anybody on cloud migrations at this particular company? And then we're grabbing all those people and we're sticking them in a IBM Connections community. Because you know what? 2 of those people are from India, 1 is from Africa, 4 are from the US, and then there's you. And odds are, if you're a larger company, you probably don't know any of those people, or you know very few of them. So how can we enable knowledge sharing and hence redefining how collaboration is done within your company? So some very interesting kind of things that we're able to unearth with IDNA. So pattern analysis and security is another thing. So what we can do, as you now know, we can look at how people are collaborating, what they're using. We can do this by user, by department, by geography. How do my people in France, what do they typically access? What are the tools they use most often? And then when we talk about taking France to the cloud, you know, what does that mean? And how would it impact them versus how it would impact somebody in the U.S.? This can also help you from a security perspective. So again, what you're seeing on your screen is kind of a normal end user behavior. So normal end users have little green dots when they work with mail files. Purple means server mailbox, different colors. Orange is address book type of activity. So across all your users, you see that there's a pretty normal pattern. So most people have same size dots, except for one. You notice the big green thing? That is one user accessing 2,500 mail files in the duration of when we did this analysis, say over the course of a month. Interesting. Don't know what that means, but it's only when you are able to understand the collaboration patterns of your users, your applications, and your servers as a whole that you would even begin to understand or see that something like this exists in your environment, right? So this can be used, again, for a variety of reasons. You can do this just to understand it, to know how do we need to change this when we go to a different, whatever, platform, cloud, you name it, hosting, virtualization, who knows what. Or, of course, it can be used for security reasons. And if you see something like this, there's a giant anomaly in your collaboration patterns. Again, iDNA is all about giving you answers to collaboration questions that you really never knew you could ask because it's never been this readily available, and possibly very important for management. Visualized, right? Email management compliance, I suspect, I actually can't see all the attendees, but I suspect most of you are from the U.S. If you're not, again, the whole social responsibility, email management compliance may be a big topic. So what percentage of our emails are sent during off business hours for mobile devices? You know, some of you may not care. Some of you may care. For those that do care, this is kind of a pain to work with because where exactly do you get this data from? How do you visualize it? You know, how long do you look at it? Do you look at this for a day, a week, a month, 3 months? But what iDNA, again, is able to do here is answer questions in ways that you've never been able to answer questions before. And, of course, visualize that. So you can enable management or executives with strategic decision-making or just understanding the impact of something that they're asking of you to do, right? So what we do, panagenda really strives to prove the ROI of the existing infrastructure, which again doesn't mean that we're necessarily against, you know, any particular direction, but we see our job as helping you quantify, answer questions with facts as opposed to emotions, help you calculate risk and cost of certain efforts of going somewhere, and just making IT agile or helping you make smart decisions, not just, you know, because it's a trendy thing to do to go to the cloud, but, you know, what does that mean for us? So we can certainly help you gain unique insights and facts, change the future of IT in whatever way that makes sense for you. And certainly once you understand what is orphaned or outdated data, we can help you reduce network traffic, your disk space requirements by huge, significant numbers. So you've heard me say, we've seen 50%. I've seen higher than that. I've seen lower than that as well. But, imagine your world if you could get rid of half of the data in the servers that you're managing, and what does that mean? And what would that mean when somebody then asks you, hey, let's go to the cloud, or hey, let's virtualize, or hey, let's go to a different platform. And this certainly is matured, scalable enterprise software. So even if you're a small shop, this certainly is going to work for you. We have over 7 million users of panagenda software worldwide. We have several that are customers that are over 100,000 users. So it's certainly scalable as well. A few more resources, and then we'll get to a little bit of Q&A. We do have a sample ID and a report on our website. Even if you don't catch this link, don't worry. If you just go to panagenda.com, you'll see it under products. A lovely customer quote here on the side as well. There's a good amount of success stories on our website as well. And of course, please reach out to us. So on the line, I actually also have our sales manager, Dan Zabrowski. He's a sales manager for Americas. We very much would look forward to talking with you about, how do I answer this question? How can I show management that? How can I try this? What does it cost? How can I bring you guys in to help us answer some of these things? Because you know what? We are about to go to the cloud, or we are in the process of moving to Outlook. It's never too late, meaning especially when you're moving to something else is when you actually need this information so you can properly plan. So, don't think, well, we're probably not going to be on Notes much longer, so I don't need this. We would very much look forward to talking to you in one way or another. There's a contact form on the website. You have our email addresses here on your screen. And yeah, with that, I'd like to open Q&A.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Francie. So if you have a question you'd like to ask about the presentation, or what kind of information you could derive from the IDNA, certainly type it in now, and then we can Francie can respond to that directly. If you have to run and don't have time,
I like it.
Let's see who that might have been an old one. It's not sure where that was coming from. But anyway, there are a couple of questions that a couple of people have asked me of a couple of questions. So if they used IDNA, what is the real optimal time for monitoring so they get a real clear picture? Is it a month? Is it 2 months?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Like all the questions, the answer is it depends. You can get really good info out of a month, because if you think about a month across your environment, people that go on vacation, as long as it's a month that isn't like Christmas or something when people are tend to be off, or maybe not like the end of the year, fiscal year, whatever, as long as it's not, kind of a weird month like that, a month is a good starting point. And honestly, what we typically do is, depending on your needs, run it a month and then see, right? If there's data in there that shows that we may need to refine the question or refine the answers, or maybe this is something we want to zero in on more, extending that time may be a good idea. But I would say anywhere between 1 and 3 months is a very good starting point. Certainly a week isn't going to do it. I mean, and we can actually show you numbers, what somebody's infrastructure reported as after a week, and then how they reported it after a month. So like, one of the things that we show you that I didn't put in the slides is a number of unused notes licenses, right? So that may look very different after a week versus after a month. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes perfect sense. One of the users commented, yes, for example, we're in higher education, so summers would not be a good time to do this now.
Exactly, right.
So, excellent, that's right. A follow-up question to that. So are the reports that you have shown in some of the slides, are they auto-generated, or is that something that Panagenda that takes the data and then creates that for the customer?
Those are auto-generated. So for those of you that are familiar with Domino Double Check, that required a lot of, data. You had to give the data to IBM basically, and then consulting structured it into slides. So this is different in that it is productized and theoretically self-sufficient. And I say theoretically just because it may be very helpful to have somebody interpret the data or help you interpret the data, but there's nothing required to generate the reports. Those all come from within IDNA.
Okay. And do you have an example of an executive saying, this is what I want to do, but once they've seen the analysis from IDNA, they've said, oh, wait a minute.
Absolutely. We have lots of examples from that, actually. So the mobile usage is one that, honestly, being in the U.S., that one didn't even make sense to me in the beginning. So we had executives in Germany saying, you know what, we're going to turn off all traveler activity. Nobody needs to be working on the weekends. And then once they looked at, well, how many people are actually working on the weekend, or how much work is being done on the weekend, and once we showed them that it's actually all executives and sales, they said, well, you know what?
Change their mind real quick.
Well, or maybe let's do this, maybe let's look at this problem in a different way, right? And that's what this is all about. It's not necessarily that the decisions that executives make are wrong, but the way you go about them may need to be different. So if sales predominantly works on the weekend, is that really what you want to shut down? Yeah, we've had customers, loads of customers that came to us using this tool to help them quantify what it will take to go to a different platform, and we've had some change, well, a lot change their mind. Just because once